Welcome to the deep dive. We're taking a closer look today at Village Falls, using the information we've got to try and understand some pretty concerning local stuff.
Exactly. It's not just about laying out facts. We're trying to really get into what's apparently been going on.
And specifically for you listening, we're focusing on understanding the, let's say, alleged behaviors and questionable actions of a few key individuals, Bobby, Don, and Jeff. That's based on the document we reviewed, VWF.pdf.
That's right. Our sort of mission here is to pull out the key details about them from this source material and figure out, what the implications might be for the village.
And it's important to remember, this source presents a specific viewpoint, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's one perspective, and that's the perspective we're exploring today, what it claims, what it suggests.
Okay, let's get into it then. Starting with Don McCormick, or Donnie, as he's apparently called. The description right off the bat is pretty harsh. Playing in sandboxes, taking toys, doesn't play well with others.
Yeah.
A liar. Why start there?
Well, it really sets a tone, doesn't it? It suggests right from the start a potential lack of maturity, maybe trustworthiness, things you wouldn't necessarily want in a public official.
That sandbox analogy implies.
Yeah.
What, selfishness?
Yeah, kind of a selfish, maybe inconsiderate way of dealing with people. And the source seems to think this attitude carries over into his actual role in the village.
Okay, so specifics. He's on the water committee, and his wife, Heather, she's the water biller.
Correct.
And this document raises the possibility of them getting free water. There's even a rumor mentioned. What's the core issue there?
It really boils down to a potential conflict of interest and maybe misuse of village resources,
Right.
If he's involved in water decisions and she controls the billing, well, the optics aren't great. The suggestion of free water, even as a rumor, really undermines public trust. It hints at maybe personal connections mattering more than fair practice.
And that's a huge problem, especially in smaller governments where maybe the oversight isn't as rigorous.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
The document also points out his lack of formal education, says junior high graduate, and this, well, frankly, disturbing detail about him and his wife enjoying planning to, and I quote, screw somebody else over.
Yeah, that's a pretty damning characterization. It paints a picture of people maybe more focused on personal vendettas or settling scores rather than the community's good.
Enjoying causing harm. That's concerning.
It suggests a really problematic motivation for being involved in village affairs, if true.
And it seems this isn't just talk. He apparently has a reputation for starting conflicts and then pointing fingers elsewhere.
Classic blame shifting, perhaps.
We even get a specific incident mention him yelling at Mayor Serino at the compound because his wife was upset.
Right. That suggests a lack of professionalism, maybe an inability to keep personal feelings separate from his official duties, potential for outbursts, not really respecting the office.
And now, the source mentions his current tactics, staging a walkout on the mayor, calling it dereliction of duty. What's that about?
Well, a walkout like that can be seen as pretty disruptive. It looks like using political pressure, maybe putting a personal agenda or factions agenda ahead of just getting the government's work done.
And tying it to dereliction of duty.
That's a heavy accusation. It feels like an attempt to undermine the mayor publicly. Makes you question if it's really about principle or just about power plays.
The people he hangs out with, according to this source, are also highlighted. Crazy Bob and temper tantrum throwing toddler Jason.
Yeah, those labels themselves tell a story, don't they? The associations, as described here, just add to the concerns about Don's judgment and, the kind of political environment he might be fostering. Suggests alliances based on maybe disruption rather than constructive work.
And maybe the most serious claim. The source says Don believes he's untouchable. And that the whole reason he ran for trustee was to protect his wife and keep his own water bill at zero.
If that's his real motivation, seeking public office primarily for personal benefit like that, that's a huge ethical red flag for an elected official. It suggests completely ignoring the responsibility that comes with the job.
It's putting self-interest way ahead of the community he's meant to serve.
Precisely.
And it's not just this one document, apparently. Paul Italiano is quoted describing the McCormicks as toxic.
Right. Hearing that label from someone else suggests this isn't just an isolated opinion. It hints that their overall impact on the village might be widely seen as negative or harmful.
So summing up Don McCormick, based purely on this source, alleged abuse of position, ethical questions, manipulation, a pretty grim picture.
It is. Now let's shift to Crazy Bob. The language used for him is even stronger, if that's possible.
Yeah, pathological sociopath, path liar, can't tell the truth. Menace to society. That's
Yeah.
extreme.
Extremely strong language, yes. It portrays someone fundamentally untrustworthy and potentially dangerous in a position of authority.
And the source claims the McCormick's back him because he yells and screams at people for them.
It suggests a kind of strategy, doesn't it, where they allegedly use Bob's confrontational style to get what they want, almost like outsourcing the aggression. It's a manipulative dynamic described there.
He's also called vulgar and inept.
Mm.
And there are claims he tells people they're being watched, investigated, falsely claiming he has some kind of authority. How does that affect people?
Oh, that can create a really toxic atmosphere. Fear, distrust, instability. When someone in or claiming authority spreads rumors or threats like that, it really damages the community fabric. Intimidation tactics.
Then there's the alleged physical incident being charged with throwing another trustee across a room
Yes.
and then trying to get the village to pay his legal fees for it.
If true, that's just staggering.
Same.
A potential violent act by an official, followed by an alleged attempt to use public money to defend himself. That points to a serious abuse of power and a lack of basic respect for norms.
There's also rumor mentioned about his past. Something about Dutchess County and a deli in the early 2000s.
Right. We have to be cautious with rumors. Obviously, they're unverified in this document, but its inclusion definitely adds to the overall negative picture the source is painting, raises more questions about his background, his trustworthiness.
And finally, his behavior in executive sessions, talking on a live camera, discussing confidential stuff, making accusations.
Executive sessions are supposed to be confidential for a reason. Sensitive matters are discussed. To just broadcast that or discuss confidential things openly shows a complete disregard for the rules, for privacy, for how governance is supposed to work. It breaks trust completely.
So the themes with Bob, according to the source,
Yeah.
dishonesty, erratic behavior, abuse of power, zero respect for rules, or confidentiality.
A deeply problematic portrayal.
Okay, let's move to Jeff Smith, Mr. Water. He's also connected to the Water Committee, right?
Yes, like Don, he's on the water committee and he's a trustee and apparently gets paid for both roles.
Which straight away raises flags about potential conflicts, doesn't it?
It certainly does, overseeing a system while also potentially benefiting from it or being paid by it in multiple capacities.
And, surprise, surprise, the source alleges he also doesn't have a water bill because of his position and friendship with Dawn and Heather.
It's becoming a bit of a pattern in these allegations, isn't it? It reinforces that concern about officials potentially using their roles for personal perks, like free utilities. Erodes that idea of fairness.
The source also throws in that he falls asleep in meetings wearing a baseball cap. Minor, maybe, but
But it could suggest a lack of seriousness, maybe disengagement. If you're consistently nodding off during important village business, are you really fulfilling your duties? Raises questions about commitment.
And it gets worse. The source accuses him of doing absolutely nothing for the village except acting like the boss.
That's a pretty direct hit on his performance. It suggests a perception that he's maybe enjoying the status of the position without actually contributing much or maybe even throwing his weight around.
We also get details about limited education, 10th grade, a desire to be a union lackey, and this pay-to-play accusation. What's that suggesting?
It paints a picture of someone perhaps motivated by self-interest, looking to align with powerful groups or individuals for personal benefit rather than a genuine desire for public service.
Okay, but then there's this really inflammatory comment attributed to him in April 2024, calling the village police department a lynch mob.
Yes, that's incredibly serious. For a public official to use language like that about the police force is deeply concerning and divisive.
And then he apparently tried to make it go away by teaming up with someone connected to the former police commissioner, someone described as a lackey.
Right, which suggests not accountability, but maybe trying to bury the issue through political maneuvering. It just digs the hole deeper, really, erodes trust even further.
The source also touches on an incident involving an African-American family harassed by the fire chief back in November 2023. Jeff allegedly promised help, but didn't follow through.
And instead, apparently helped Jason, the temper tantrum toddler figure we mentioned earlier, get connections for village jobs.
What does that imply?
It suggests, potentially, a disregard for some constituents' serious concerns, maybe prioritizing political allies or connections over addressing alleged harassment. And it again hints at possible favoritism in village hiring or opportunities.
And finally, his ties to the McCormicks are emphasized. The claim is he doesn't make decisions without Bob's direction.
That points to a lack of independent thought, doesn't it? If a trustee is just following someone else's lead, whose interests are they really representing? Their own,
Yeah.
their constituents, or just Bob's? It undermines the whole idea of representative democracy at that level.
So for Jeff, potential corruption, conflicts of interest, disengagement, really problematic public statements, and maybe just being a puppet for others. That's the picture painted by the source, yes. Taking Don, Bob, and Jeff together, the document alleges a pattern of potential power abuse, serious ethical lapses, and maybe prioritizing personal gain over the village's welfare. It's quite a collection of allegations.
It really is.
Now, the source also talks about a group called the Foul Four. Who are they supposed to be?
That would be Walt, Don, Bob, and Jeff. The four of them.
And what's their alleged plan?
According to the document, the plan is to turn on the mayor if he doesn't bend to their political will. They supposedly want some kind of public grandstand.
By being derelict in their duties.
Yeah, the accusation is they're threatening to essentially stop doing their jobs, maybe through walkouts or refusing cooperation, to force the mayor's hand on things they want, even if the mayor thinks those things are wrong, like trying to hire people without proper procedure or agreement.
So trying to bypass rules, avoid transparency, pressure the mayor through threats, and maybe media attention.
That's the allegation. It also mentions potential violations of New York State public integrity laws. The source clearly points to Don and Bob as the ringleaders in this alleged scheme.
Okay, let's quickly touch on the other two members of this Foul Four. Walt Mash, nicknamed Angry Santa.
Right. The story goes that Don and Heather convinced him to run, presumably to secure another vote on the board they could control.
He's described as gullible, naive, believes anything Bob tells him.
Yeah, doesn't really understand his role, just follows Bob's lead. Also described as a bully sometimes, looks over his spectacles menacingly.
He also double dips waterboard and trustee.
Yes, another instance of that dual role issue. Limited education mentioned too. High school, background in heating systems.
But there's a recent hint he might be trying to do the right thing, straying from the group.
A slight indication, yes. But the source suggests the others are trying to undermine that, pull him back into line.
Okay, so Walt seems potentially manipulated, maybe conflicted. What about the others mentioned? Ryan, the mama's boy mole.
He's young, 23, perceived as a know-it-all, a mama's boy. The main allegation pre-election is quite serious. Supposedly took pictures of confidential records from the clerk's office without permission.
And gave them to the opposition for a court case about alleged election fraud.
That's the claim. Now, he's apparently trying to cozy up to Bob and Don, but they allegedly dislike him and are just using him as a pawn. Described as sneaky, a liar, arrogant, thinks he's untouchable because of his father's former position.
A lot going on there. And Rose V., the tainted optimist.
She's a new trustee, initially seen positively direct, supportive of the police, friends with a former mayoral candidate, Jen, wants to stop the games.
Sounds good, but
the source expresses some concern. She means well, potentially, but might be influenced by this uneducated and deceitful groom, as the source calls them, called the sweet mother on the board. Seems she wants to do right, except maybe when it directly benefits her own constituents, hinting at some parochialism. Social media activity is also flagged as a potential concern.
So well-intentioned perhaps, but maybe easily swayed or prioritizing narrowly.
That seems to be the implication, yes. A bit of a mixed bag.
And what about Mayor Huber in all this? How is he portrayed?
He's generally portrayed positively. Wants residents happy, services running, problems fixed, the village improved. Just trying to do the right thing, basically.
But he's being undermined.
Yes. The narrative is that Don and Bob, primarily, are constantly trying to pressure him, undermine him, hide behind him while trying to force bad decisions. He's shown as trying to be responsible against this pressure.
Which brings us to these alleged secret meetings.
Right. The Foul Four, Walt, Don, Bob, Jeff, are accused of holding secret meetings, maybe at diners. This would constitute a quorum meeting outside of official public channels.
Which is illegal, right? Open meeting laws.
Generally, yes. Deliberating public business as a quorum outside of a properly noticed public meeting violates transparency laws in New York, the alleged purpose. To strategize how to force the mayor's hand.
Wow. Okay, so bringing it all together, Don, Bob, Jeff were at the center of allegations involving conflicts of interest, potential corruption like free water, abuse of power, Bullying, dishonesty, lacking transparency.
Exactly. And the actions of others, like Walt, Ryan, and the alleged tactics of the Fal Four, seem to orbit around or enable the behavior of those core three, according to this source. It paints a picture of a local government potentially struggling with serious ethical challenges and power struggles.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As you listen to this, what do you expect from your local officials?
Mhm.
Where is the line for ethical behavior? And maybe most importantly, what can residents actually do when they have these kinds of concerns about the people representing them?
These are absolutely crucial questions because if even some of these allegations are true, it raises serious concerns about the health of local democracy right there in Village Falls. It really underscores how vital it is for citizens to be informed, engaged, and willing to demand accountability.
Definitely food for thought. What happens when the people in charge might be the biggest problem? It's something worth pondering long after this deep dive ends.